You're listening to Secret Sonics, a podcast exploring the creative side of music production. Welcome back to Secret Sonics. Today I'm joined by Ami Kozak. Ami began playing bass guitar at the age of 13, playing in bands throughout high school and college. He then went on to study film scoring and songwriting at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. You may have heard of it. After graduating, Ami began composing music for advertisements, writing for brands such as Hallmark, Toyota, Apple, Coors, Macy's, and many more. Writing music for ads and TV gave Ami the opportunity and experience to develop as a producer, having to write in various styles across multiple genres. He eventually relocated from New York to LA, where he started a band called Distant Cousins with two fellow producers / singer-songwriters, Dov Rosenblatt and David Swirsky. The band has released 2 EPs, several singles, and most recently a full-length LP. Distant Cousins have had their songs featured in multiple ads, feature films, television shows, and trailers. In addition to his role as bassist and vocalist, Ami also serves as the band's producer and mixer / engineer. That's just a little background for you guys. Ami and I actually grew up in similar circles in New York, and we both played bass in bands around the same time, and we have a bunch of mutual friends. And I've always been impressed by his musicality. And so my buddy Yakir Hyman said I should reach out to you. And here you are. Welcome to the podcast, Ami.
Ben, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, dude. Tell me a bit about how you got started getting involved in music production.
So music production, I'm a late bloomer to music production because I was always very much a technophobe when it came to, and by that I mean technology phobic, when it came to anything to do with recording and engineering. For me, I was always like a musician first and started, like you said, at age of 13 playing bass. I was a singer and bass player playing in bands, and I always looked at the studio stuff as this big mystery. And whenever I had studio experience in the past, whether it was like in my high school bands in college and whatnot, I was just kind of, taking a back seat and letting them do all that mysterious magic stuff. And I found that, whenever I would sort of inquire on how stuff would get done, it was always just such a different language to me that I just kind of was intimidated by it. And it wasn't until I'd say in my last semester at Berklee College of Music, I took a course called Production Techniques for Songwriters. And it was this like one little last course that, I kind of squeezed in before graduating, saying, okay, maybe it would be good to graduate from GarageBand. When I was up until that point, I basically had a laptop and, we had homework assignments at school and I would use GarageBand, and I wasn't thinking at all about production or mixing or anything, but just, sort of a recorder to get the song ideas down. And whatever I put down was just there, very basic demos and things like that. And I always assumed that when I would graduate college, I was the songwriter / musician, and I'd hook up with a producer engineer getting out of school. And, I'd be like, that was my strategy. I'd hook up with a guy who knows all the buttons and the techie stuff. Long story short, I took this course and it just forced me to use Logic to record a full-length song. And after that, upon graduating, I started working at a music production house that specialized in commercials. And the turnaround times for getting demos done for commercial spots were, a matter of days, even sometimes less than that. And I just had to dig in and do it, and go through the grind of forcing myself to learn how all the production stuff worked. And luckily, I was always using Logic Pro, and I always found Apple software to be much more user-friendly. And I came at it from a very organic way, just, guess and check, playing with sounds. And I had a mentor at that studio who was a longtime, engineer and had experience on the technical side. So I was always asking questions to him. And eventually...
What was his name?
His name was Josh Brachhausen. And this company was called Mophonics Music and Sound, and they do music primarily for ads. And I started there as an intern, and on my very first day I was like repairing cables and putting stuff together and all this stuff that was sort of forcing me to face the fears of the technology and overcome that. And basically through software and through using the software, I was introduced to the world of, I had that little bit of foundation from that class that I took about signal flow and how audio processing works, how recording works, just the basics. But I wouldn't say I had production chops yet. I was just, had a basic sense of how to use Logic Pro, basically. And then in the process of composing for commercials, you start to experiment with all the sounds and stuff, and you realize it's kind of like learning music all over again. It's just from a different angle. You're learning how all these sounds, you get an appreciation for sound design, and it's not just melodies and beats and all that kind of stuff, but everything kind of sitting in both corners, the production side and the composition side melded together, and I was able to really get a sophisticated understanding of production, mixing, engineering. Fast forward to today, I'm now like a Apple certified Logic Pro user, and Distant Cousins songs, some of my band's work is featured in the official Apple Logic handbook, like the manual on how to use Logic. And I don't say that just as like, a humble brag. I say it just because I think a lot of people out there label themselves as one thing. In the creative process, like I'm a guitarist, or I'm a keyboardist, I'm a singer, and they leave all these other categories out of their wheelhouse. And like I said, I assumed I would hook up with some producer to do all that stuff. And today I am that producer that does all that, fancy stuff that people are like totally, mystified by and don't understand. But it definitely takes a lot of time in building up those building that muscle and building up those chops, but through just doing it, like that's the short answer, doing it. That's how I was able to develop as a composer and as a producer.
That's great, man. Yeah, a lot of people like to procrastinate the doing it and like watch tutorials and don't actually get into it, but when you actually get in and do it, that's when you improve.
Correct.
So was there a song or album that really opened your mind to the possibilities of what could be accomplished with production?
I think a specific song or album. I mean, I'd say that there are songwriter producers out there that, you can tell kind of when I watch them work and watch their process, I identify with it a lot. I think of somebody like Ryan Tedder. When I watch clips of him in the studio, Ryan Tedder is from One Republic. And he, is always is a songwriter, but also producer. And you get a sense of, when you watch him work and his process, it's something that I relate to a lot. Even when you watch, when you look at Beatles records as they evolve over time. Sure. I was recently doing this gig where I had to learn a bunch of Beatles songs, and you start from the early stuff, which has a particular sound, and then you listen through as the songs progress into the years and how the production gets so much more sophisticated. Yeah. And the sounds become so elevated, and all the different stuff that's going on with panning and, experimental sounds, how they were so ahead of their time. I'd say I came to that later. I had already kind of developed an appreciation as a producer, but I would say that in doing more production, you just gain an appreciation for so many different styles of music, because even stuff that you would never even think about, just because you hear a certain drum kit sound and you're like, wow, that is that's amazing, and you do research on how that's done and you incorporate that into your own your own work. And as a commercial composer, I had to listen to tons of reference tracks of stuff. Black Keys came up all the time for references for commercials and all the different current artists. Oh yeah. I mean, you just get a sense of listening not just to the details of a song in terms of chords, melodies, and instruments and what's playing, but what kind of compressor they're using, what kind of gear is going on. You listen from a different perspective. I get an appreciation for what's going on, on a holistic level.
That's really awesome. I've also found that just getting into music production has opened my mind to many different genres that I wouldn't have been open to before. You grow up as kind of like a rock kid, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, you know what? I'm kind of cool with this pop stuff or whatever. For sure. Forcing yourself to do, the unfamiliar stuff, and you kind of get an appreciation for, for everything. Mm-hmm. Totally. So you're a songwriter. How does that work for you? Do you just get inspired and start writing, or do you have some sort of process that you go through? Yeah, I definitely don't. I don't wait for inspiration at any point. I mean, when it does happen, the first step is I pull out my iPhone and I get onto the voice memos and I start humming stuff. If I hear something that I think is like gold or that I'm going to use. But I've, coming from the world of, writing for ads and commercials and being assigned projects where, you can't afford to wait for anything, you have to get going. I would say usually if I get some kind of brief that's describing a certain
type of music some client is looking for, I'll start hearing it right away. And on those first few minutes, that's when I'll have my phone out just kind of recording, the overall outline of what I'm going to do. So I start singing into it, and then I can translate that later. But yeah, I really just start. It's hard to say. It comes from different places. Sometimes it's like a melody that I'll hear, and other times I'll be working. I'll start just playing with different, whether it's new plugins or soft synths or things like that I have that I want to play around with that will give me little bits of inspiration, and then I'll start from there. And I would say lyrics for me, I tend to find later as a songwriter. I definitely don't come from the world of, sitting with an acoustic guitar and writing a song. I definitely do that now, but my background has always been playing in bands where you're riffing with like a power trio or 2 or 3 other guys or whatever, and grooving on stuff and then finding the top line somewhere in there. What's cool about working with Distant Cousins is the other 2 guys definitely come more from the traditional singer-songwriter space where, you're sitting with an acoustic and writing the lyric and melody and acoustic that way, which is, I think, the best way to get the best song, because if it works in the most minimal type of production, then it's going to work in a bigger, more fleshed out production.
I really like that. So it sounds to me like the DAW or / the tech plays a big part in your songwriting process.
I would say that it depends. The tech stuff. If I'm not thinking about songs per se, if I'm thinking just about making a track. The DAW is like the instrument, and I'll go from there. Sometimes I try to force myself not to go there, and if I'm doing like traditional songwriting where I need a strong lyric and a strong melody, I actually wait before I dig in on the opening up Logic and starting to throw down a bunch of ideas. I'll do that. I'll do that sometimes to help get things going, but like if I have to write a song, if I have a commercial I have to work on, if I have to write a theme song or just working on a song, I'll actually pick up the guitar or a ukulele or piano and just work out the melody and lyric and structure of the song first, so that I can know that it's going to work once I start to produce it. Because if it feels good, like I said before, if it feels good in that minimal state where you're just snapping your fingers and singing the melody and you have something memorable, then you know that no matter what production you do, it can only enhance it. But the reverse could be true. You could fall into the trap of piling on a bunch of layers with no song direction, and your song kind of ends up following a chord progression or following a very grid-like structure of a track. So it all depends, sometimes so I would say the best thing for songwriting in particular would be to take it to a minimal place, but sometimes you also just need that kick of inspiration. So, a 4-bar track of something cool to help get you going helps too. I would also add, especially for co-writing, if you're writing with other people, it's, you can have all the patience in the world with yourself when you're sitting down on just the piano and writing and going through that grind. But I know that from working with other people, having a track that can kind of help you see the finished product really helps get things going, and it's more fun to kind of groove to something, and other people like working off of that. So both ways work.
That's so funny. I was like literally about to ask you about the collaborative process.
Right.
Can you expand on that a little bit? What's it like to collaborate with, producing music in the context of a band?
It's better. I like it better. It's more fun. I'm not like a solitary guy. I mean, I do it for a lot. I'm a lab rat when it comes to producing, but my preference is always to be, social and hanging out with people. And I think it's just more fun when you're working with other people, because you kind of get that instant audience for your ideas, an instant filter of stuff that's not working. It kind of helps you it kind of helps you not hold on to your babies and not be too precious about ideas, and kind of help build something together. I think it's really healthy to do that. You end up getting, usually, I would say, almost every time you get something that is better than the sum of its parts, because even if it goes in a direction that you're not sure about, it ends up in some place that's much, much stronger because 2 or 3 people were helping to build it. And I think it helps, get you from A to Z as opposed to A to B, if you know what I mean, where you start an idea, continue it, and it fizzles out. Because when there's other people motivating that session, where you might get tired, and worn out, somebody else gets inspired, and you feed off each other in that way. And it kind of, when I take the producer role, say with Distant Cousins, or I sit down, I get inspired to just make something so I could show the other guys. Like, it gives you this sort of the feedback that goes on between within a collaborative process is really helpful to actually being productive.
You guys must have like a very open relationship in the sense